This video is to help you become familiar with using Mendeley, which is a reference manager software. While the video is specific to Mendeley, almost all reference manager software packages have the same functionality, so feel free to use one of your choosing. This video assumes that you've created an account, installed the software and web importers, but we'll review that quickly. You can Google download Mendeley and follow the link. On this site, you can create an account and download the file for your operating system, Windows, Mac, or Linux. When you're installing it, make sure you select the Install Web Importer as well as Word plugin. If you didn't, don't worry, you can usually do that later in the Tools menu. Alternatively, you can always Google Mendeley plugin, Chrome, or whichever browser you're using, and use the web importer link, or the link to install the web importer from there. So for instance, mine's already installed. I would then need to click Remove from Chrome at that point. So let's look at what Mendeley looks like within the desktop app. Over here on the left, we have the All Documents tab. This is all of my references in here. As we scroll through, we can see that I've got probably 1,000 or two or so kind of collected over the last 15 years. We can create a folder. So for instance, we can create a new folder and we'll say, we'll call it using Mendeley. And create that folder and then sync it with the web by clicking the sync button. If that sync button doesn't show up for you, you might not be signed in. You can sign in under the File menu and click Sign In at the bottom. I'm signed in already, so my option is to sign out. On the All Documents page, it has every reference that you have in your library. You can sort whether that has an attachment, sort by author, so you'll see a lot of papers in here I haven't bothered to enter, or they're old papers, and so the optical character recognition, which is how these importers work, wasn't able to read the file. You can also search by year, so you can pull up all of your recent stuff, or by date added, or what journal, anything that you want really. So we can look for the ones that have papers, for instance. So we look at this paper, Hydrological Feedbacks in Northern Peatlands. We can click on it, it will load the PDF. There's a PDF reader built into Mendeley. And then you can look over here and just kind of see if everything is imported correctly. So we have Waddington, Morris, Kettridge, Granith, Thompson, Moore, and those are the same authors there. So Mendeley read the author block, and then imported these into here. If you needed to make an edit, if you thought something was wrong and you said, oh, it's not actually 2015, it's actually 2016, then you can close it and that will be saved in there. So you can now see that it's 2016. That's obviously incorrect, so I'm going to change it back to 2015, which is when the paper was published. The point of this being is that even if the reference importer was only 90%, 95% correct, once you correct it to 100%, once the reference is fully correct, then there's no need to ever edit it again. So you're only ever really doing it once. And to be honest with you, the importers get better and better with every update, and they're sort of 100% correct probably 90% of the time, as opposed to 90% of the time, or 90% correct 100% of the time. It's very rare that you need to edit anything nowadays. So let's look at importing into Mendeley. You could do it manually by clicking on this little arrow and say enter manually. This would be maybe for old papers, gray literature, such as government documents that don't really exist on the web. It would also work really well for books. So you can click here and you can say a book or a book section or computer program or a film. Anything like that, a hearing, if it's court or whatever, but the most common would probably be journal article. I'm not going to bother creating one from scratch because it really is just filling in the blanks. One method that you might receive or might get papers is having a colleague send you a paper. So you could click Add and then Add from a file. I downloaded this PDF earlier, but it would be exactly the same if someone sent it to you as an attachment in an email. So I'm going to click on the file to open it. Now, I should point out that this reference doesn't already exist in my library. So when I click Open, and oh, I need to look for it. Oh, you know what? I'm going to import it into here. So using Mendeley, and I'll say add, and I'll add it again in here. Click open. There we go. So this was all essentially mined from the PDF automatically. All of these authors were typed in, the abstract was typed in, the journal, the year, the volume, all of this was typed in automatically. Now I was messing around with this a little while ago and deleted it, but it seems to have remembered that I had edited it to be 2500, which it clearly isn't. It is actually only 25 or volume 25. So I've changed it to the correct volume there. And again, once you make that change once, then it's good to go. So I'll close out of that. Another way of importing is using the web importer. So if we go back to Chrome, and I'm a big Google Scholar fan, but really any page will do. And I want to import this recent paper from a friend of mine, Maria Strack at the University of Waterloo, doing some petroleum exploration stuff out in I think this was in northern peatlands out in Alberta. So on this page, this is the Nature Communications page, I can click on the little web importer, the Mendeley M, if you will, the white M on a gray background. And it'll take maybe a minute to load. And so any reference on here, and so if you go through and you read down, any reference that the author has referenced, all of those papers, also show up in here. So this can sometimes be quite a large list. But for instance, here I'll click on this one and just double check. So okay, publisher, the year, the month, the day. This all looks correct. So this is good. So I'm going to select this one. I'm going to select the using Mendeley folder that we created. I'm going to say add to my Mendeley. And so it will import now like this. I'll just give it a second to finish uploading. And I just want to show you that from the Google Scholar page, if we clicked the web importer, is that we could have also imported it here as well. So Google, the web importer will read your Google Scholar results, basically, and so we can see pathways for ecological change, pathways for ecological change. So it's read this, figured out what journal, what it is, all of that stuff, and is available for importing directly even just from the Google Scholar page as opposed to the journal homepage. So that's quite powerful. So if we go into Mendeley and I hit sync, then we'll sync. That Strack paper should show up shortly. It'll download the PDF so that the PDF will be imported as well. And when I double click on it, we now have the PDF stored locally with all of our inputs correct. So there's nothing really I need to edit in here. So that's 3 different ways, manually, via PDF, or via the web page, of importing references into Mendeley. And again, if something's not quite right, you can just go in, edit any of these terms, and as soon as you exit out, those will be permanently saved. So if we go into Word, and I've kind of pre-written a little sentence or two to make my life a little bit easier. This is how I write papers, is I'll just write, and if I happen to know the reference, I'll just kind of put a placeholder for the author there. So I'll show you a couple of different techniques for importing. One is just to highlight so that essentially when you do add the reference, it just deletes it for you, if you will. I'm going to say insert citation. And I know I'm looking for that Halsey paper, and it is this climate and physiographic controls. So I'll click that, and I'll click OK. So what it's done is just written over the text that I had there, and has now input the et al. In the 1997. And so if I go over to here, Gorham and more, so what I could do instead, let's say I hadn't even written that, and I just knew that it was going to be the Gorham and more papers, then I can insert citation. I can type Gorham, that's the paper that I want there, and I want the Moore paper, which also has Roulet as an author, and it's this one that I wanted, this 1992 paper. And so now those have been inserted automatically, and I just searched for them. We'll look at a Waddington, Mike Waddington paper. So I'll say insert citation, and I'll type Waddington. Now Mike's got a lot of stuff, but I want the paper that he wrote also with Nick Kettridge. So I'll just type Ket. Oh, and there, this is the one that I want, the Waddington Kettridge paper. Now notice that Kettridge isn't even the second author. It's just searching all of the text of that paper. So it's really, really easy to find papers if you're familiar with your literature. So I'll select that and click OK. So what you'll see is that it has rewritten the entire thing, but obviously I don't want the author there because it's not sort of correct. Do not highlight and hit delete. That's not the correct way of doing it. Instead, make sure that the author field is selected. Say edit citation, click back on the author that you're interested in, and say suppress the author. And then we're good. We'll also look at that Voigt paper that we just imported, just to show you how it works. So I can say insert citation, VOIGT. There's the paper that we just imported. And I'm going to say suppress author all in one step. And there's no actual T there. So that's that paper that we just imported. And now we can add the Strack paper. So maybe we'll change this and say work done by local authors. And say C Strack like this. So what we'll do is we'll, again, highlight that to delete it, if you will, and say insert citation. Let's look for that Strack paper. Now that was published in Nature Communications, so I can search by author last name and then the journal, right? So if I know my literature, know my papers quite well, then I can click OK. And then here I can say edit citation, go back to Strack, and I'm going to add a prefix, which is the word C with space. So now that C is included in that reference in this case, so that I'm not typing it manually within the reference. So at this point, I want to insert my bibliography. So I'll just click Insert Bibliography, and boom, all of my papers show up immediately like this. And what you'll note, and this is probably the best reason for using a reference manager software, is that if your advisor or me as an advisor tell the student, actually we're going to try for hydrological processes instead, then we can go up into this style, click hydrological processes, and everything changes. Now just take a quick look at the reference list again, and just watch it change when I change the journal name. Similarly, if you're going to do APA, it will change to MLA, it will change. And Nature, if you've ever read a Nature article, they're really quite odd, but you can see that they're just numeric by superscript with footers basically. And so it just does that for you automatically. And because you've done it correctly, such as this C number 6, it's just done for you correctly. And so if you needed to insert a new journal or have a different journal, then you can just click More Styles, and you can say get more styles, and you can search for your journal. You could even create your own style if you needed to, so if you were in charge of a journal or something. So that is using Mendeley, using the Cite While You Write, or the Mendeley Cite-O-Matic, I suppose. Cite While You Write is EndNote. Again, just another reference software. So happy referencing.